My name is Amyah Weakley, and you're listening to Mason's Way, a podcast exploring the life and activism of AIDS prevention advocate Belinda Mason. I recently received a separate file containing mainly newspaper articles, both following and just before Belinda Mason's death. In the file, there are news articles, and there is one news article titled "She Never Had a Sad Day," where those closely involved with Mason's journey with fighting AIDS and her continuing activism gave testimony to the Owensboro Message-Inquirer on their connection to Belinda and remembering the kind of person she was. The article also talks specifically about how many people attended the funeral, the imagery surrounding the event, and words of praise by those who cared for Mason. Here's an excerpt from that article published September 13th, 1991. In a tiny Baptist church in a rural Kentucky town, America said goodbye Thursday to its AIDS poster child. And then the crowd that overflowed East Hartford Baptist Church went away and left Belinda and Mason asleep in the arms of Kentucky. Mason, the Appalachian-born writer who became a national symbol in the fight against acquired immune deficiency syndrome, died Monday in a Nashville hospital at 33. She had received AIDS-tainted blood after childbirth in January 1987. She had become a spokesman for AIDS activists and was the only person with the disease to serve on the National Commission on AIDS. Her activism had consumed the last 3 years of her life to the point that she once said she felt like an AIDS poster child. Thursday, they came from the mountains of eastern Kentucky, the halls of Washington, D.C., and the Kentucky governor's mansion to say goodbye with tears and with laughter to a woman who had touched their lives in a variety of ways. Every seat in the tiny sanctuary was filled. Some 50 people lined every available space along the walls. Another 70 filled the basement to listen on speakers, and 25 or more stood outside. The church had been filled more than an hour before the service began. A few funeral parlor fans moved into the sultry air. "We have all eternity to get cool again," the Reverend William Holliday told the crowd. Mason was a playwright, poet, short story writer, and former reporter. Her funeral was her last production. She and her husband, Steve Carden, had planned every detail from the organ playing of the Battle Hymn of the Republic to the high lonesome mountain gospel sung by an Appalachian trio. Mason was an uncommon woman, Holliday said. She could speak the purest Elizabethan English, and she could sound as if she never went to first grade. Belinda was so honest, she could be very frank and put you in your place without hurting your feelings. Very much. Mason, he said, was probably the Abraham Lincoln of our day. Jessie Lynn Gabbard of London and her sister Anne Shelby of Lexington joined with Ron Short of Big Stone Gap, Virginia, to sing the mountain gospel songs Mason had selected. Farther along, they sang, "We'll understand it all by and by." Short had written a play with Mason in the mid-'80s. They were planning to begin work on a major play about the war on poverty in Appalachia in 1986. But she discovered she was pregnant, Short recalled. "We said we'd get started after the baby was born." Mason suffered a stroke and ruptured uterus during childbirth, and the blood transfusion that followed changed her life forever. Short wrote a song for Mason's funeral, "Hills of Kentucky." She wanted to hear it while she was alive, so he could play a verse each time he visited. 4 days before she died, Mason called from the hospital to check on the song, but Short said he couldn't find the right words to conclude it. This week, he did. "When I am gone and the ages roll, and the Lord calls me home, when he comes looking, he knows where I'll be, asleep in the arms of Kentucky." There, in a spot Mason had selected, a spot she could see from her bedroom window and thought was beautiful, they laid the mountain writer and AIDS activist, asleep in the arms of Kentucky. Another written piece from Lexington Herald Leader Editorials from September 10th, 1991, titled "A Compassionate Life," commends Mason's spirit and determination while being actively involved in AIDS policy. The editorial reads, "The next time someone makes a disparaging remark about people who have AIDS, remember Belinda Mason. If she had not become infected with a blood transfusion with the virus that causes AIDS, only her family and friends would have known what sort of person Belinda Mason was. But by the time she died Monday morning in Nashville, people across the nation knew about her compassion, her spirit, and her determination. They knew that as a member of President Bush's National Commission on AIDS, she was a vigorous advocate of a greater effort to find ways to prevent, treat, and cure AIDS. And they knew that she was not afraid to take issue with anyone on the topic, including the president himself. While a member of the Presidential Commission, she criticized the president for making AIDS a moral issue rather than a matter of public health. She wrote him a letter in August urging him to take the lead in keeping those with the disease from becoming stigmatized. If her criticism had any effect on the president, it was not obvious. Just last week, he responded to criticism of his AIDS policies by suggesting that protesters should change their behavior. That viewpoint carries a particularly bitter irony in the case of Belinda Mason. The transfusion that gave her AIDS came during the birth of her second child. To the end of her life, Belinda Mason worked to make everyone understand that AIDS is a disease, not a moral failing. She struggled to make people understand that those with the disease need compassion and treatment, not moral censure. The greatest tribute to her would be for all of us to take this brave woman's message to heart. A file that I have has paper documentation of reviews of the movie by different educators, but the paper is delivered from the Marshall University Sociology and Anthropology Department. The pages at the other end of the paperclip show printed reviews, and the top of the page says, "Comments about Belinda." This page holds quotes from different organizations and universities. Here are a few. The staff felt the film would serve as a good educational tool for the school systems. Belinda shared her experience in layman's terms. She dispelled the assumption that AIDS can't affect me because I am not a drug addict or homosexual. It also pointed out that we do not have to be afraid of people with AIDS. And this is from Ron Woods, the district manager of the Social Security Administration in Hazard, Kentucky. Belinda used her unique circumstances as a, quote, palatable AIDS patient, end quote, to encourage healthcare providers to be compassionate to all AIDS patients, as each represents a painful and unique loss. We will use this videotape in various settings, staff and volunteer training, public programs. The length of 29 minutes is good because it was long enough for an impact and yet allows time for reflection and discussion. From Terry Green, the Director of Volunteers and Education in the Hospice of the Bluegrass in Lexington, Kentucky. The only negative reviews I found actually inspired me to make an entire episode on reviews of Belinda's life work and the Belinda film. More digging led me to find more of what I wanted, reviews, but they were essentially all positive and proud to have known of Mason. You've heard nearly everything I have besides 2 reviews. The 2 of them are similar, but I'll start with one from an HIV nurse specialist from the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics, Department of Nursing. September 1st, 1993. To whom it may concern. I am writing to express my concern about the video Belinda. I have looked forward to seeing this video because of my great admiration for Belinda Mason and her work. But I cannot use or recommend it because its otherwise excellent content is marred by a slanderous attack on my profession. I am referring to the statement made by Belinda's minister in which he blames her HIV infection on nurses neglecting to test the blood she received because they, quote, wanted to go home, end quote. I have several objections to the inclusion of this statement in the video. 1. The viewer is not given information about whether routine screening of blood was standard procedure when the incident occurred, and there is no way of knowing whether the minister's allegation that the blood wasn't tested because the staff wanted to go home is even true. The viewer cannot judge whether negligence occurred and is led to accept the minister's conclusion. 2. Nurses do not normally perform laboratory tests except certain tests done at the bedside. so I doubt that nurses were in fact responsible. If he used nurse as a generic term for laboratory and other healthcare workers, this is not only incorrect, but slanders all nurses in the process. Nurses are the largest group of healthcare professionals and provide skilled, compassionate care to people with AIDS all over the world. Nurses are also the largest group of healthcare workers who have been infected with HIV while providing this care. 3. Belinda Mason's message was always to not respond with anger and blame, but with compassion. The minister's words and contemptuous tone detract from this message. I am forwarding copies of this letter to the 2 professional organizations to which I belong. Sincerely, HIV Nurse Specialist, Department of Nursing. The other letter is from another individual who is only identified from their name from September 3rd of 1993. To whom it may concern. This is in response to the Belinda video that was aired on KET this summer. There are several items that as a nurse in this city have bothered me. First, the minister at the Southern Baptist Convention made the remark that the blood was not tested on Friday because it was Friday and the nurses wanted to go home. The nurses do not do the blood testing. This is done in the laboratory by the technician. Secondly, nowhere in the film was it mentioned that she would have died without the blood. Thirdly, I feel that Belinda did not mean the remark about some people wanting to get AIDS. However, it left the impression that everyone but her received the virus by their lifestyle alone. I am sorry that this lovely lady received the HIV virus and died. She died in the same hospital and only a few days before my own daughter died, so I can understand the grief and loss. What I cannot understand are the above-mentioned remarks or omission of remarks that has spread all through Kentucky. I feel this should have been reported more accurately and objectively. It seems like these individuals may share a common opinion on the Belinda film, as both of their narratives involve the depiction of healthcare workers and a negative perception taken from that particular part of the film. The inaccuracy of the minister at the Southern Baptist Convention, according to both parties, reflects badly on nurses who risk their lives to take care of AIDS patients in many cases. While I do think some parts of these letters are a little disingenuous to the intent of the minister at the convention and Belinda Mason, Mason's letter to President Bush certainly gives her the benefit of the doubt as she shows her support in protecting healthcare workers as well as the patients that they treat.